Greetings. I'm reading today from The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. Were any girl that is now with child to say, and even to swear it, that she was gotten with child by a ghost, and that an angel told her so, would she be believed? Certainly she would not. Why then are we to believe the same thing of another girl, whom we never saw, told by nobody knows who, nor when, nor where? How strange and inconsistent it is that the same circumstance that would weaken the belief even of a probable story should be given as a motive for believing this one, that has upon the face value of it every token of absolute impossibility and imposture. The story of Herod destroying all the children under 2 years of old belongs altogether to the book of Matthew. Not one of the rest mentions anything about it. Had such a circumstance been true, the universality of it must have made it known to all the writers, and the thing would have been too striking to have been omitted by any. This writer tells us that Jesus escaped this slaughter because Joseph and Mary were warned by an angel to flee with him unto Egypt. But he forgot to make any provision for John, who was then under 2 years of age. John, however, who stayed behind, fared as well as Jesus, who fled, and therefore the story circumstantially belies itself. Not any two of these writers agree in reciting exactly in the same words the written inscription, short as it is, which they tell us was put over Christ when he was crucified. And besides this, Mark says, he was crucified at the 3rd hour, and John says was the 6th hour. The inscription is thus stated in these books. Matthew, this is Jesus, King of the Jews. Mark, the King of the Jews. Luke, this is the King of the Jews. John, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. We may infer from these circumstances, trivial as they are, that those writers, whoever they were, and in whatever time they lived, were not present at the scene. The only one of the men called apostles who appears to have been near the spot was Peter. And when he was accused of being one of Jesus' followers, it is said in Matthew, then he, Peter, began to curse and swear, saying, I know not the man. Yet we are now called upon to believe the same Peter, convicted by their own account of perjury. For what reason or on what authority shall we do this? The accounts that are given of the circumstances that they tell us attend to the crucifixion are differently related in these 4 books. The book ascribed to Matthew says, Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened. And many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. Such is the account which this dashing writer of the book of Matthew gives, but in which he is not supported by the writers of the other books. The writer of the book ascribed to Mark, in dealing the circumstances of the crucifixion, makes no mention of any earthquake, nor of the rocks rending, nor of the graves opening, nor of the dead man walking out. The writer of the book of Luke is silent also upon the same points. And as to the writer of the book of John, though he details all the circumstances of the crucifixion down to the burial of Christ, he says nothing about either the darkness, the veil of the temple, the earthquake, the rocks, the graves, nor the dead men. Now, if it had been true that those things had happened, and if the writers of these books had lived at the time they did happen, and had been the persons they are said to be, namely the 4 men called apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it was not possible for them, as true historians, even without the aid of inspiration, not to have recorded them. The things supposing them to have been facts were of too much notoriety not to have been known, and of too much importance not to have been told. All these supposed apostles must have been witnesses of the earthquake, if there had been any, for it was not possible for them to have been absent from it. The opening of the graves and the resurrection of the dead men and their walking about the city is of still greater importance than the earthquake. An earthquake is always possible and natural and proves nothing, but this opening of the graves is supernatural and directly and point to their doctrine, their cause of their apostleship. Had it been true, it would have filled up whole chapters of those books and been the chosen theme and general course of all the writers. But instead of this, little and trivial things and mere prattling conversations of, he said this and he said that, are often tediously detailed, while this, most important of all, had it been true, is passed off in a slovenly manner by single dash of the pen, and that by one writer only, not so much as hinted at by the rest. It is an easy thing to tell a lie, but it is difficult to support the lie after it is told. The writer of the book of Matthew should have told us who the saints were that came to life again and went into the city and what became of them afterward, and who it was that saw them. For he is not hardly enough to say he saw them himself, whether they came out naked and all in natural buff, he saints and she saints, or whether they came fully dressed, and where they got their dresses, whether they went to their former habitations and reclaimed their wives, their husbands, and their property, and how they were received, whether they entered ejectments for the recovery of their possessions, or brought actions of crime against the rival interlopers, whether they remained on earth and followed their former occupation of preaching or working, or whether they died again or went back to their graves alive and buried themselves. Strange indeed that an army of saints should return to life and nobody know who they were, nor who it was that saw them, and not that a word should be said upon the subject, nor these saints have anything to tell us. Amen.